Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline Cummings, and I'm the Executive Director of Oregon Rain. I know you can't see my video right now, but that's okay. You're looking at the panelists and the moderator. I'm only going to do a quick introduction and a welcome. Oregon Rain is a nonprofit, and we exist to help small and rural communities catalyze their entrepreneurial economies. To date, we've been fortunate to have been invited to serve 20 small and rural cities across 5 counties in Oregon. I want to thank everyone who believes in the power of entrepreneurship and innovation. And thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to be partnering with Senator Roblan and Lane County to host today's presentation and conversation about what small businesses, small cities, and startups need to know about the reopening of Oregon. Many of you may have seen the governor's press conference yesterday where she announced new guidance to reopen Oregon amid the coronavirus. We realize there are still some questions about how we will all work together to create a safe and prosperous Oregon. So we've lined up this excellent panel for you today, and you'll get to hear from them shortly. Note that the only videos you'll see during this session are those of the panelists, and all the attendees will remain muted. However, we do want to hear from you, so post questions you have in the question feature, not the chat feature, but the question feature, and we'll answer as many as we can. And please, be respectful. We understand these are stressful times for everyone, and especially for the small businesses and the startups. We're all in this together, and the panelists are here to help you. Okay, I'd like to introduce first and hand it off to Erin Reynolds, the incredible city manager of the beautiful city of Florence, and also the first rural community to invite Oregon Rain in several years ago to help build your entrepreneurial economy. Erin is also the incoming vice chair of the Oregon Rain Board of Directors. We're very pleased Erin will be with us to moderate today's session. With that, I hand it over to you, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar titled Reopening Oregon, What Small Businesses and Startups Need to Know. We want to emphasize that today's audience is made up of Oregon small businesses, preferably with less than 25 employees, and startups, and their city and county leaders who want to provide the best support we can to you, our business community. With that focus, Rain chose 4 wonderful panelists that have committed an hour of their valuable time to share relevant and current information that matters to you as small business owners and entrepreneurs during this COVID-19 crisis. I think it's important to note today's date is May 8th. We will be recording this, but while it's going live, we find ourselves 2 months after the state of Oregon first issued the declaration of emergency for COVID-19. Through this emergency response, I have never been more pleased to be a part of Rain, Oregon. As a small town city manager of less than 9,000 in population, here on the Central Oregon coast, we, along with everyone else, have been so overwhelmed with the volume of information coming at us during this emergency response. I was so thankful that our city was already connected with Rain, who as an organization already had the virtual infrastructure in place to immediately pivot their business support delivery from in-person to over the internet in just a matter of days. I found so much comfort knowing we could immediately start providing support to our small business community with Rain through virtual webinars, Zoom meetups, and mentoring all online right away in the month of March. In addition to our small businesses on this call today, I know that there are a lot of small cities like Florence listening in. I understand the pressure that staff and elected officials are under to meet the needs of our communities during these uncertain times. I want to recognize how especially difficult it has been to do that during this public health crisis, where we are all relying on the state, public health, and other public health authorities to provide rules and guidance for how we are to go about reopening Oregon. With that acknowledged, I am grateful to be a part of connecting you, our local people, to have access to the state and hear directly from them today. Before introducing our panel, I want to give a sincere thanks to our county, Lane County, who is a joint host of this webinar today in conjunction with Senator Roblan's office. Over the last 2 months, the Lane County Commissioners, our public health department, and the entire Lane County emergency response team have provided excellent leadership and professional support to our community during this crisis. And I am certain we will continue to receive excellent leadership and support as we enter this long road to recovery. So let's get on with it. Today we have 4 esteemed panelists, and I will share a 1-sentence bio. Please wave as I say your name. And then they will each take a turn to share relevant and timely information with you, our Oregon small business owners. After each of the 4 panelists are done speaking, we will move on to hearing questions from the audience. So go ahead and please click on that question mark and submit your questions. And I will go ahead and introduce each of our panelists. So we have first the esteemed Senator Arnie Roblan, District 5 Co-Chair, Joint Special Committee on Coronavirus Response and member of the Governor Brown's Economic Recovery Team. And he's going to be talking a little bit about the $10 million small business assistance package approved by the State Emergency Board in response to COVID-19. Our second panelist is Leah Horner. She is the Jobs and Economic Policy Advisor, Regional Solutions Director for Governor's Office, also known as the Regional Solutions Team, Governor's Panel for Opening What Business Owners Need to Know. Our third panelist is David Gerstenfeld. He is the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Division Director at the Oregon Employment Department. And he will be talking a bit about unemployment benefits and what entrepreneurs and small business owners need to know. Last but not least, our fourth panelist is Melissa Drugi, Regional Development Manager, Business Oregon. And she will be talking about the support and financial resources available to small businesses coming out of the Business Oregon Department. So with that, thank you for listening, and I am going to turn it over to Senator Roblan.
Again, I want to thank everyone on the panel, as well as all of those of you who are listening and watching this webinar. Getting information out consistently is one of the issues that we work on. And in my Senate district, there are 7 counties, and I spend a lot of time meeting with all of them at different times. When this whole thing began, I was appointed as one of the co-chairs of the coronavirus task force, committee at the legislature. And we got together, as many people know, we had not had a real successful short session. And we wanted to show people that in times of crisis, people work well together. And it was a bipartisan, bicameral group of legislators who worked amazingly well together for a good week, getting hundreds and even thousands of pieces of information from citizens and everybody else about what can we do and what should we be doing. Our goal was to try to come up with a policy option package of things that needed to happen if we had a special session called by the governor. As you know, we have not had that special session called. I am gratified to know that the report that we sent to the Speaker and to the President of the Senate, also to the governor, has been used as part of her plan, a roadmap, as if you wish, for the kinds of things that we needed to get done quickly, because she has the executive power to do it. We didn't need to have a special session. So we continued to move forward and looked at the things the governor was putting in place. And what happened was there were a few things that she didn't have the executive power nor the resources to do. And so we have had 2 e-boards. I'm also an e-board member. That's a small section of House and Senate members who can spend money that's been allocated to them by the full legislature. We had about $75 million, which is not a lot of money considering what's going on in the pandemic. And so we gave $25 million out very early on in this process for the governor to use in the ways that it needed to be done. And then we came back together and allocated another $32 million. So we have about $18 million left, and we're worried about a fire season and other kinds of things. If we haven't had a special session, that money is being reserved for those kinds of emergency things that happen. In that package was a $5 million from the state, from our legislature, and $5 million from Business Oregon that they had to find, which was not an easy task in their process. But that $10 million, what we had found and what we were trying to do was fill in the gaps that existed from the federal money that was coming out to lots of different places, to small businesses, to UI, to all of these other issues. What were the gaps? Where were there things missing? And we believe that small businesses under 25 employees who couldn't get access to money from the federal government was one of those things that really needed to take a high priority. And we had to use what money we had. So we took our 5 plus the 5 that Business Oregon is coming up with and gave it to Business Oregon with strict instructions to make sure that they spent it across the state, that impacted communities in particular. And we look at the coast as one of those very impacted communities. We have the highest unemployment in the state on the coast because we are so tourist driven. And so how do we get money to those businesses that weren't getting it from the federal government and others? And they have their $10 million that they are starting to allocate. Just heard today that $2.5 million of that dollars is going out in an RFP, hopefully sometime today. So if you're a a community, a local government that's out there that have already set up programs to help your local community, say you have $100,000 or $200,000 and you've figured out a way that you can help your local businesses survive, those that haven't been getting money, we're asking, and Business Oregon, and you'll hear more about that later, is asking you to think about how could you pair with the government, and so we could match your money, so we could actually make that 10 million into a greater number of dollars for all of our communities by working collaboratively with local governments. So that's behind it. That's why we're doing it. That's what's going on. And look, stay tuned for future information about that in the short term. But thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Senator. That's a great segue. We will turn it over to Leah Horner to talk more about that.
Great, thank you, Erin. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this afternoon and for inviting me to be on this panel. I appreciate that. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what the governor rolled out yesterday in her press conference as far as what reopening the economy looks like. And so I think for most of you who saw that, I think most of it was pretty self-explanatory, although I've been inundated with questions about some areas that may be a little ambiguous. So I'll try to focus on that, and hopefully that helps put all the pieces together. So we are looking at reopening Oregon's economy on a phase-by-phase basis. And so the guidelines that came out yesterday are what we would need in order to be ready to open in phase 1. And so areas need to meet the gating criteria and the core preparedness around a decline in number of cases, enough testing, ability to contact trace, enough hospital beds. So there's a whole bunch of criteria around that that is required before anybody can move forward into phase 1. So what the governor has asked is for public health regions to come together with their counties to make sure that as everybody is moving forward, that they can meet all of the criteria that has been defined through that process. So the counties, the hospitals, local public health are all working together to put together plans. And something else that Oregon is doing that is, I think, a little unique is that we are also allowing counties who have had little or no cases to apply for phase 1 reopening before the rest of the state is ready. And so what we've done through that process is set up kind of a prerequisite checklist that the counties would need to go through and submit plans to the governor's office. And then we are working in conjunction with the Oregon Health Authority to make sure that all the criteria is being met. And so we really wanted to focus on that approach, knowing that there are some communities that were not as hard hit as others, and really trying to balance the economic needs for areas that may have not been experiencing the impact of some of the other areas of the state. So it is not required for a county to put together a plan for phase 1. I'm hearing some counties who don't even want to be in phase 1 when the rest of the state gets there, and that's totally fine. I think what that does, though, is it has created some confusion, because if if I live in, I'm just using examples, if I live in Lane County and they're in phase 1, but Lynn County is not, how do I know how to operate my business? Like, there's some ambiguity about who has put plans forward, how people are expected to operate under that. So over the next few days, we will be working on some public facing information to make it real clear who has submitted plans for reopening as of this weekend. And we'll be updating that on a regular basis. I will tell you, most of the counties that have applied thus far are Eastern and Southern. We do have a few in the Valley. And so, but we'll be working with them to make sure that their plans are hitting all that criteria. So we will be posting those plans for applications online. If a county moves to phase 1, then we will be posting which counties have been approved to go to phase 1 and what that means for businesses. So part of what we tried to do is through the reopening plan is we developed sector guidelines. And we focus those on 7 areas to have a statewide standard for business operations in these sectors. And those sectors are childcare, outdoor recreation, transit, retail, restaurants, personal services, and gyms. And gyms is a new add-on, so that those guidelines are forthcoming. So those are the 7 that we as a state have said, okay, if you're going to open in phase 1, here are the guidelines that businesses need to follow in order to make sure that you're maintaining the public health standards that we need to operate safely. And so all of those will also be posted. Some of them got posted yesterday, but the rest will be posted by next Tuesday, I believe. To really make sure that it's very clear how businesses should be operating, and hopefully also giving enough lead time so that you can set up your operations. I know that businesses who have been shut down for the last 7 or 8 weeks cannot just go to reopening tomorrow. You really need to phase in that planning for the most part. So we're also trying to be very cognizant of that. So that's kind of where we are at with reopening, trying to make sure that we have real clarity out there for everybody who's going to be operating under phase 1. The one other side note I'll mention is that if you're a business owner and you don't want to operate in phase 1, but your county is open in phase 1, you don't have to. You are more than welcome to wait for phase 2 or to see how phase 1 is playing out and then make a business decision about whether or not to open. Nothing is requiring or forcing anybody to reopen. And I know that we are hearing a lot of concerns from workers who want to make sure that they have the right protections when they do go back to work. And so all of those things, as far as reopening, we're trying to make sure are really flexible to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the individuals in the communities.
Thank you, Leah. That's great. And we're going to move on to David and hear from the unemployment department. And I just wanted to let you all know there's quite a few questions coming in. So we're excited to get to those when we're done with David and Melissa's introduction. So David, please take it away.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me to be here and to share some information. We know that there's a lot of anxiety out there and lots of challenges that everyone's dealing with. Erin mentioned that it's been 2 months since the disaster, the executive orders in Oregon. 2 months ago, the unemployment insurance system was dealing with record low unemployment. And then we fast forward to now, and we're certainly not doing that anymore. We have record numbers of people in Oregon needing assistance, and we've also had multiple pieces of federal legislation that create great programs to help people, but that take us some time to stand up. We are working through the claims that we get at record speed. We're doing each day more than twice what we used to do in an entire week just a few weeks ago. So we're making a lot of progress. We know that there's still people out there that haven't received their benefits yet, and we're really focused on doing everything we can. I want to hit a few of the highlights, and I'll give kind of a disclaimer that things get very fact specific, and there's a lot of different programs and a lot of different circumstances that all of you face. So I'll try to hit the highlights that I think are of most interest. One is that you may have heard in the news, and probably will more in the future, that some states are running out of money for unemployment insurance benefits and their trust funds. So this is just me reassuring all of you that Oregon is not in that situation. Our legislature created a great formula for funding unemployment insurance benefits, where we entered this crisis probably with the best funded trust fund in the nation. So we're watching it closely, but that isn't a risk for Oregon businesses and workers. We have our regular unemployment insurance program that is kind of traditional employer-employees, and the employees can get benefits. We're continuing to do that and see record numbers of people taking advantage of that system. I wanted to talk about some of the specific programs real briefly just to highlight what they are. Many of you may have heard about self-employment assistance, which is a great program. Oregon was one of the first states to have it. It probably actually is not what most of you are interested in right now. Just at a high level, that's a program for people who could get regular unemployment insurance, so kind of traditional employees, but instead of trying to find a new job, they're trying to become entrepreneurs and to start their own business. So if that is your situation, that program applies. You can contact us, and that is kind of an offshoot of regular unemployment. What a lot of people are getting benefits from right now is one of the new federal programs, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And that's really designed to help all the different groups of people who normally can't get regular unemployment insurance, including people that are self-employed, independent contractors, a bunch of different groups of people. We went live with being able to accept applications for that program a couple weeks ago. It is a separate application and separate weekly certification process. So do go through that. We're getting lots of questions. We're working through those. We are paying out benefits and continuing to process applications. If you do apply for the wrong program, we're checking and we are helping people get into the correct program, and they are going to be retroactive. So it may take a little bit more time, but if you aren't certain, you don't have to apply for both. We'll make sure that the program that you should be in is the one that you will end up in. We also have some extension programs because some people are going to run out of regular benefits. Those will be rolling out soon. Particularly for some of the governmental or for any nonprofits that are on the line, the federal legislation also created help for those employers that reimburse the state for benefits that are paid. And we haven't implemented this yet. We just recently got some guidance, but half of the cost of those benefits will be paid by the federal government. So that will help some of the municipalities and nonprofits whose budgets will be impacted by layoffs and people seeking benefits. The last program I was going to mention is WorkShare, which is a great program that allows you to cut the hours of your workforce instead of laying them off, and they can receive partial unemployment benefits to partially make up for the wages that they're not receiving. And it's a really good tool to keep your employees attached to you. You don't have to retrain people. They're still engaged somewhat. So it doesn't fit all of your circumstances, but when it does, it can be a real useful tool. And we're trying to put a lot of guidance up on our website for all the different scenarios. We have some guidance up, and we will be updating it, addressing a lot of the issues around when the employers, when you all are calling workers back to work and what that will mean for your workers. So we're trying to get guidance out there. Things are changing pretty rapidly, so do check that website and you can sign up for updates. And finally, just want to close by thanking you all. I know how challenging this is for you. Many of you are worried not just about yourselves, but you're also very concerned about the workers that you look after all the time. And we're doing our best to help you support yourselves and them. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think I saw in the chat box here that it looks like some of the websites that you all are referencing, our moderators are going to try and put those resources up for the audience to see. So thank you for sharing, David. We're going to move on to Melissa.
Thank you, Erin. First, I want to thank everyone for having Business Oregon here today. I'm going to kind of run through the beginning stages of our $10 million to assist our small businesses with 25 employees or fewer. And I can happily report, in addition to what Senator Roblan has already said, that this afternoon, when we're wrapping up this webinar, we will be shortly releasing the announcement on the 10 million. So you'll be able to read in more detail the structure around how we're going to start rolling this funding out. But for today, I also want to recognize to the audience members just the understanding of what you must be going through, and thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with us. And I hope that it's meaningful and helpful for you. And if you have questions, we're looking forward to addressing those as well. So as you know, the Oregon State Legislature, in partnership with the Governor's Office, has awarded $10 million for Business Oregon to be administering out to eventually small businesses. Today's announcement will talk about a first $2.5 million to be followed with a round 2 of another $2.5 million. This is what we're calling a match program. So for those communities that have been able to bring funding sources together and assist small businesses in this time of need, this is an opportunity for you to leverage those funds to get additional funding to help small businesses. Again, this is an effort for us to get statewide. So you may be asking yourself, why would we roll this out in stages? But this is really in an effort to make sure that every part of the state is prepared and ready to accept some of this funding to assist small businesses. And we know that some communities are still working through the details of what kinds of programs they've wanted to assist businesses with. And so by staggering it, we have an opportunity here to make sure that we meet the expectations of the legislature and the Governor's Office in terms of getting this out statewide. Just to kind of go through very quickly, for the announcement today that will come out this afternoon, we will be hosting a webinar or question and answer series on Monday for those that are interested in applying for the funds. Those that are eligible for applying are cities, counties, economic development districts, our council of governments, those that have had community funds or possibly have community funds ready to go, but they haven't launched them yet. They potentially could meet the short turnaround for this first $2.5 million. We'll have a question and answer series for them on Monday, give you an opportunity to read what is released this afternoon, and then prepare yourselves for what is going to be a pretty quick turnaround for a response to the RFP. The proposals for this first round will be due Sunday, May 17th at 5 p.m. So basically 2 weekends and 5 working days. I look at Leah when I say that because I think Leah's weekends and weekdays blur like many of ours. But nonetheless, we want to be able to get this money started and helping small businesses. And ultimately, that means moving quickly. And I was looking back, we were talking earlier about timelines and being 2 months, as Erin said, from the executive order. And I went back to trying to figure out when did we first talk, or when did the E-Board approve our ability to go and start structuring this 10 million to get out. And to today's date, it's 10 days, or 14 days, I'm sorry. So 2 weeks. And so we're moving hopefully as quick as we possibly can. We know the importance of this funding. We know that federal funds have been there. That's great. But we know we need to continue assisting our small businesses and to get as much assistance as we can across the state with as many companies and businesses as we can. So I'm going to pause there. I'm sure we have questions, Erin, for all panelists. But again, thank you to the audience for sharing time with us today. We truly appreciate that you wanted to spend time with us.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, we do have quite a few questions, and of course, with the most timely news of reopening and guidance for phase 1, a lot of these are actually going to be directed to Leah at the business for the regional solutions team, as she's a great contact straight to the governor's office, and also to Senator Roblan. So with that, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, Leah, because I think these are transferable to a lot of different industries, and just a lot of questions that the normal business owner is asking. They just really want to know how these rules apply to them. So this is specific, but maybe you could expound on some general philosophies for how people can triage and figure out where they stand in the timelines and how and when they can know they can open. So this specific question says, I own a small boutique fitness studio in Coburg, Oregon. It's my understanding that as long as I follow the guidelines Governor Brown spoke of yesterday, that I will be allowed to open in the first wave.
Thank you for the question. That is correct, but you have to wait for your county to be approved. So the fitness and gym and dance class guidelines will be coming out next Tuesday. That will make it real clear what you need to adhere to operate, and that's the same for all the sectors that I mentioned earlier. And then as soon as your county is approved, then you will be able to operate under those modified guidelines.
So following that, how does a person know their county has been approved? Where is that going to be listed?
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're working on an outward-facing website, probably on the governor's website, that we will be able to share probably mid next week, that will show who's applied and who has been approved and the dates of operation county by county that they will be going into phase 1.
Okay, thank you. So if somebody has a specific question about their business, so this one happens to be a pet grooming salon, how do they kind of look through everything and figure out where they fall? I know you mentioned there's some general guidance for employers and for just the general public. What would that look like for a business owner to figure that out for themselves?
Yeah, so we're working on clearer guidance around that. The one thing I will add is that if you've been able to operate now under, I get in trouble every time I say this, but phase 0 is what I'm calling it. If you're operating right now under phase 0, you are absolutely able to continue operations into phase 1. And there may be little to no modifications about what that looks like. So, dog groomers, as an example, is one that has been able to operate in phase 1 while maintaining the physical distancing with the dog owners or pet owners. So that can continue into phase 1, but we will be putting together some clear documents around that. If there are specific questions, though, I mean, I am always a resource, and the Regional Solutions team is as well. I know Sarah Means is on this webinar as well, and so people are welcome to reach out to us if you just can't quite see yourself in any of the guidance that's out there.
Thank you, Leah. This next question is for Senator Roblan. So how was that $10 million decided? Why not more? And could you share some more about that? And this is from a Eugene business owner. So
10 million was, there is no real way of figuring out how we're going to do this. So we have 3 co-chairs of our Ways and Means process and 2 leaders in the Republican caucuses and the president and the Speaker of the House. As we're getting ready for an emergency board, they get together and start talking about what are the kinds of things that they think are really important that we need to deal with. And at some point in that mix of people, they look at the total resources we had available. And at this point, it was $50 million. And all of the different things that were coming in. There was emergency housing that needed to be taken care of. There was forest fire season, getting ready for that. There were a list of things. And so what they did is try to figure out what, in all of that money, how could we allocate? And that's why they went out to the governor's office and said, you know, we have X number of dollars, but we think it should be twice that much. We think it should be 10 million. And so the governor came through and said, yes, we will find it, and really entrusted Business Oregon with finding the other $5 million to make a total of $10 million that we could do to small businesses. We were, at the time, recognizing that phase 1 and 2 of the CARES package was coming from the federal government, and we were hoping it was going to get to smaller businesses. The first phase seemed to get wrapped up, and not as many small businesses have been able to access it. The second round, we've done much better on the coast. I've talked to a lot of banks and small credit unions and others who have been successful in getting some money out to people with these federal PPP loans that are forgivable if they're used appropriately. So our issue was, what about those people who couldn't? They didn't qualify for one reason or another for any of that money as well. And they were in that group under 25, because we don't think of under 500, which is the federal standard for small business. That's small business in Oregon. For us, it's under 25. And so we have an organization that knows how to do that can deal with it. That's Business Oregon. We trusted them to figure out how best to get this money spread around the state. We decided in the midst of things that they wanted to keep around 20 million. We kept about $18 million for future stuff. Until we have a special session, we can't allocate more money there. And if you understand that most of our money comes from income tax, people are not working now, we're not getting any income tax. We are anticipating on May 20th a report that will tell us that we're $2 to $3 billion down. So this is going to be an economic impact greater than we had during the last Great Recession back in 2007, 8, and 9. That had major effects on Oregon spending, and we don't want to spend money ahead of time that we aren't going to have in the future. So we have been very careful. We have very frugal people in the Ways and Means and process, and that's why we ended up with 10 million. No perfect program how to get that, but that was just what we came up with in comparison to the other things that we had to spend it on. And we really do want it to get out to the people who haven't been able to apply, haven't been able to receive any of that PPP money and other federal funds that have become unavailable. So that's where it came from.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question is for David at the Unemployment Office. This is from an entrepreneur who has never had unemployment before, and they're confused. They don't know which one they should apply for: regular unemployment, the self-employment, or the new pandemic unemployment assistance, the PUA. As a sole proprietor, how do I even account for my payroll on my application? And this is from an entrepreneur in Veneta.
So probably and this will be a little bit of an overgeneralization, but the easiest way to think about it is, if you're filing quarterly tax reports with the state of Oregon and reporting your payroll, if your own wages are being reported and having unemployment insurance taxes paid, then you should file for regular unemployment insurance. For many of you who are self-employed, that won't be the case, and you're not reporting your own wages. For you, it's going to be the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And again, if that general rule doesn't apply, we will help get you into the right program. When you apply under the PUA program, we'll ask you for your 2019 net income. If you don't have any documentation, you'll still receive the minimum benefit amount, which is $205 per week. Plus, for about a 4-month period, you can get an extra $600 per week. But if you do provide your 2019 net income, it may entitle you to receive more than that minimum, possibly up to $648 per week, before that extra $600 gets added on. If you are continuing to get income from your business, you may still be entitled to some benefits. And as you file your weekly claims, we ask you to report what your gross earnings are there. So we know it gets a little complicated between the net and gross. We try to set that out in the forms. But at a high level, it sounds like the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program is probably going to be the program for most of the people that think of themselves as self-employed.
Thank you, David. Just as a follow-up, for those who have applied, whether it's for the PUA, the regular unemployment, any of these things, when can people expect to hear, and how, is there a way, a tool online for people to check their status?
For some people there is. We're actually paying record numbers of claims within kind of the normal 3-week standard that applies to unemployment insurance. There are some claims that are taking longer. If you applied for regular unemployment insurance, you can check on our online claim system and it will tell you the status of your claim. If you file an application and it hasn't been processed yet, for regular unemployment, we are sending out confirmation emails to let people know that we've received it. We just haven't been able to process it yet. If you applied for the PUA program, that new one that I was just talking about, unfortunately, right now, there isn't a way to check on the status. The application that we rolled out, we frankly know is not an ideal application, and we went to get the program operational as quickly as we could. So right now, there's not a way to check on the status. We are working on it, kind of a next generation that we hope to roll out that will be easier to use and will provide that kind of confirmation. In terms of timelines for the PUA program, we are already paying many people under that program. Because it didn't exist 2 weeks ago, we're still learning what makes a complicated claim and how long it can take. We're getting many of them paid out already, but if it is a more complicated one, it may take up to 3 weeks or so before we can do that. We're doing everything we can to speed it up, but at this point, again, we're still kind of learning how the program works and finding out how many applications we'll be receiving.
Thanks, David. I know there's a lot of questions around this, and I think this is just something I'm going to open up to everyone because it hits home for a lot of our friends and neighbors right now. What would you say to someone that's living their very real life and they have maybe $100 in their bank account? They're just really nervous. They don't have a job. They're not currently working because of COVID-19. They've applied for unemployment, EIDL, and the PPP, and have not received any of them. Do you have advice for people? Where can they be looking for support? They're just nervous, and life is very, very hard right now.
So we know there are those people out there, and our office takes calls and emails from them on a daily basis. We will continue to try and forward that information to UI, to these other programs. We've been having conversations in our counties, with our federal delegation, trying to figure out what would it look like in this next round of money that's coming out. But we know there are people who are slipping through the gaps, and we need to hear from you so we can try to figure out what the best avenue is available to you. And we will try to get back to you. It's either myself or my staff, Rosie Shatkin, are answering those emails and looking to see what we can do to help. The counties are doing a lot of different things for small businesses, and I appreciate that. We know that it is that independent contractor, that entrepreneur who's going to bring us out of this in the future. They have been the backbone of the economy in our state for a long, long time. And we have to figure out ways in which we can support them, ways in which our families can support them. I know our faith communities and others are trying to do things to help people. And if you have a connection, sometimes they can help. But know that many of us have been listening to these stories and hearing from people, and it is heartbreaking. And we will continue to figure out whatever we can to help solve any of the problems that we can. Thanks.
Thank you. To tag along to that, I mean, one of our biggest challenges is getting money locally down from the federal and the state into the local level, whether it's nonprofits or cities or other partners with government. So Melissa, this one's for you. Our rural city wants to band together with several others to raise a single emergency loan fund of around $100,000. Many of our cities believe we can get our city councils to increase the amount they will approve if the state was to use a portion of that $10 million in the small business relief funds. What are the chances of something like that happening, a partnership amongst many cities applying for that relief fund?
Yes, there's already an example of this in our community funds that have had funding that has gone out, where they have come together, pooled their resources to build a sizable amount of funding and put it out on the street. And so this match program that I spoke about today is exactly to further enhance those kinds of concepts, not just the ones that have already been successful in putting money on and out there to our small businesses, but also to those communities that are still wanting to do that. And this is an opportunity for them to raise the $100,000, but then receive the state match of up to $100,000 as well. So they have the possibility of doubling that fund. the first thing that they want to be considering is that there's only going to be one applicant, or a lead applicant, I should say. So they're going to want to find the best place for them to, who's going to host their application or response to the RFP. And they can describe in that RFP who they're serving and what communities they're serving. And so that's the first kind of organizational piece they'll need to know is who's going to take lead on behalf of their organized communities to do that. Perhaps the county, perhaps their economic development district, maybe it's their local council of governments. But someone needs to kind of sponsor that effort around a one application in for their area of focus. I would also say that we have boots on the ground to assist with these questions and how to organize this. We have both Leah's team, the Regional Solutions Coordinator out of the Governor's Office, and we also have my team, the Regional Development Officers, that also live and work in the communities of which they serve. These individuals in these two teams work very closely together, and they coordinate their efforts to provide this kind of assistance. And so I would ask that you please reach out to those individuals and have those conversations. They can guide you through the organization of how to put that response together to the RFP. And please know that if you feel like you're starting at the very beginning stages, that was the very reason for Business Oregon wanting to stagger this this funding, so that we could give opportunity to places that still want to organize themselves and provide funding to their businesses and support what their businesses are going through at this difficult time.
Okay, so it sounds like first step is for the cities and the local governments to work on applying, and then that money will flow from the local government out to our community members. So Leah, this one's for you. What plans do we have to support businesses for long-term recovery in our hardest hit sectors like hospitality and the tourism business? This was respectfully submitted by Representative Sherry Helt, District 54 in Bend. So thank you everyone out there joining with us, and I will turn it over to Leah to answer.
Thank you for that question, Representative. So I will, this may be a little bit too weedy, but so the way that we have kind of, I think by default, approached this pandemic is that we have been in a response mode for a really long time. I mean, it's not that long, but it feels like a long time. And now in normal states of emergency, you go from response to recovery. And as you're responding, you can kind of figure out what your recovery needs look like. But we have this bucket that we're starting to go into right now, which is reopening. So we've gone from response to reopening, and now we need to start looking at what recovery looks like down the road. And so I will say that the governor has started having a number of conversations around how do we prioritize underserved and underrepresented communities in the recovery efforts? How do we put that at the forefront so we are not taking a playbook from other types of, natural disasters or other types of emergencies, and we're really focusing on the business needs of those communities and how to make sure that they are sustainable, not only in phase 1, but presumably through phase 2 and then phase 3. And as the reopening PowerPoint indicated yesterday, we won't get to phase 3 until there's a vaccine. And so there will be this continual length of time that we're in this limbo phase that we need to make sure that we are as responsive to the needs of business as we can be. And that means being flexible. That means hearing the concerns and hearing the needs. And we are 100% committed to making sure that we're having those conversations and taking the right steps to move all of those pieces forward.
Thank you, Leah. Melissa, you mentioned some webinars that are going to be hosted to answer questions specific to each industry sector that are rolling out next week. If I heard you correctly, And I think Austin's going to put those in the announcements, but I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Actually, the webinar or question and answer period for Monday will be specifically for those that would like to respond to the RFP to access some of the first $2.5 million that's coming out. And just for clarity purposes, so Business Oregon is pushing these funds to our local partners to administer in their communities to their small businesses. So for us, we want to make sure that we're answering the questions for those organizations that are going to be responding to the RFP to get access to these funds to help small businesses in their communities. And so it's very important that we make sure that we have the ability for everybody to ask all the questions that'll be necessary to make sure they put in strong responses to that RFP. Because as Leah said, this is a time where we want to reach out and get to all areas of the state that are needing assistance, not those that could just access it first and foremost. And I also want to emphasize the importance of the fact that if there's something, it's very difficult to roll a program out, even though we have several programs that we stand up and administer on a regular basis. It's always a difficult situation to try to get it right always the first time or 100%. So I want all of those that have participated today and that will have access to these funds, if there's something that just really honestly didn't work well for you or was a hurdle, whether you're responding to the RFP or you end up being a recipient of these dollars, we're very interested in knowing what that is, because that's how we're going to improve and better the next rounds. In my positive light, in more money that the legislature will find and help support businesses. And I know what a difficult statement that is, but I know that we're all watching and looking and hoping that there is an opportunity for us to grow our 10 million into something larger to assist more and more and more of our small businesses throughout this state. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions and then do some closing comments before we end at 1. So David, can you address the competing tension of employees receiving the additional $600 weekly benefit for businesses, and their employees are of course pleased to be making that money on unemployment? How can we bring them back? We know it's going to be difficult to bring them back at their original rates. Morale may be an issue. Any advice for these businesses? And this is from a business owner.
Sure. We certainly recognize those competing policy goals. There really was a big push to make sure that people were getting money quickly and to help support not just individuals and families, but also communities. And that's really something that the unemployment insurance program does during a big economic crisis like this. It keeps some money flowing in the local economy. The extra $600 that is added on to benefits has created this situation where some people are making more in unemployment insurance than they're being offered. We are putting some guidance up on our webpage. I mentioned briefly earlier, and we'll be revising that as guidance about how businesses open continues to evolve. One of the things to highlight, though, that may be helpful is if someone is not working at all and they're getting their full unemployment amount, if they're brought back to work part-time, they are still eligible in many cases to get some of their unemployment insurance benefit. And right now through July 25th of this year, that includes the additional $600 per week that they would receive. So a lot of businesses we anticipate will be starting up not all at once, not bringing everybody back full-time. So if you are bringing people back part-time, as long as they're working less than full-time and earning less than what their regular unemployment amount would be, they should keep filing, and you have the ability to bring them back to work, and it's not having that kind of real significant impact on their earnings. The other point that I'll mention is the federal programs that were paying money through right now, like the extra $600, there is clear guidance from the U.S. Department of Labor that not going back to work because you're making more on unemployment insurance is not a good enough reason. That if that's why you don't go back to work, then you're not eligible to receive those benefits. And we do have a place, and I think the link was provided, where if you're trying to get your workers back and they're not coming back because of that, we would want to know, because we don't want people to get benefits that they're not eligible for. If the reason they're not coming back is related to the coronavirus crisis, then they may still be able to get benefits. Like if they're staying home because they've been advised to self-quarantine because they're in a vulnerable population, or because their kid's school is still closed because of COVID-19. So we do think that our guidance will evolve as businesses open and we see how this plays out across the state. But that part-time benefit is one thing that we are encouraging employers to think about, because that may help a lot of them while also helping their workers.
Thank you, David. So we're going to close out with a question from Leah and then turn it over to Senator Roblan for some closing comments. So Leah, again, trying to hit all different aspects of this opening guidance. What is the governor's office plans to make it easy for the general public to understand the reopening guidelines and rules? For example, is there going to be public information that's going to come out with posters, bus ads, social media? And then again, how can you just give your best suggestion on how people can just navigate and answer some of these questions for themselves as the general public or a general business owner?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think one of the things that I've been referring to is us working on guidelines for how to be a good human in phase 1. So I think that we will be working on some of those general guidelines, but I saw a draft. I don't know if it's been made public yet, but we're also working on consistent signage for all businesses to have, so that you have a very clear message for what the expectations are for operating in phase 1, and acknowledging that, you know, that each business should not be having to come up with that themselves. So we're working on posters that can be placed in your windows that, you know, are telling people, you know, if you don't feel good, you really should not be out. You should be at home, and just kind of walking through what the general expectations are for operations. We're also working on signage for transit so that folks are real clear, and that the transit guidelines are forthcoming next week and will be a little bit more nuanced. But again, we're working on, and this is actually, I'm co-chairing the Governor's Economic Advisory Council on this, and that was a suggestion that came from them this morning as well. We need a very clear something for everybody to understand kind of what their operational requirements are, and so we will be working through that and posting all that on our website, and also distributing to businesses as it becomes available. The one other side note I just wanted to mention, and I think this was a question for somebody else earlier, there is still PPP loans available. There are banks and credit unions who have reached out to me indicating that they have capacity. So if somebody has not been successful before, feel free to reach out to me or one of the regional solutions coordinators, and we can try to help connect folks with other lending institutions who still do have funds available. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Leah. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank each one of you individually for joining us here today, to Oregon Rain and Lane County for facilitating, hosting, and providing the technology for us to gather for an hour. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Roblan for some closing comments and maybe some advice on how you think we should all navigate the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you, Erin, and thank you to the other panelists. I really appreciated the how to be good humans comments, because I think that's one of the things we all have to continue to work on day in and day out, and recognize to give that extra space to people. There are a lot of people who are concerned about their own personal health and other things. They get outside. They're kind of frightened to be out there around other people because they've been home for a while. They've stayed safe, and they need to feel comfortable that they're around other people who care about them as well. So wearing the face masks and stuff is really important. The other thing I want to say is that this was designed this meeting was to help us recognize the entrepreneurial spirit of what is Oregon. We have made it through really difficult times over and over again, and it's generally been that group of people who are that entrepreneurs that have the vision about seeing things differently. I've been heartened on some of my calls recently that there are a group of people out there who are trying to figure out, how can I make the best of this? What can I do with respect to making a new business around Zoom meetings and getting more information and how to get it to people, or all of the businesses in our state that turned around and started making PPE because they knew they could, and they found the materials. I was on a meeting earlier today that just was saying that some of our local people are organizing ways to get self-made masks and other kinds of things, the parts of the materials that are available for fishing fleet with respect to thin plastic coverings can be used to separate things. There's a lot of innovative thought that's going on, and as we come through this coronavirus, we are going to need that creative spirit working over and over and over again in each of these little businesses. Let it be known that the state and all of the people at the legislature, the governor's office, are here to help any way we can, to answer questions, to give you the insights you need. And I know that there's groups around the state like RAIN who have entrepreneurs who have been successful at different kinds of things that can offer experience to people. So keep that spirit going. Figure out what you can do to help yourself and fellow Oregonians weather this storm. And again, thanks to everyone. I was pleased to hear you mention Representative Hilt, and I will shout out to her that I will look forward to that time when we have this virus under control, that I can come over and eat at one of your restaurants and spend some time in Bend, which is an amazing place. And hopefully you can come over and spend some time on the coast, and we'll be happy to have guests again. We haven't been as open to guests on the North Coast in particular for a while. So we want Oregon to get back to the Oregon we know, and it's only going to happen because we have entrepreneurs like the people on this call who make the best out of really difficult situations and come up with new solutions to problems we didn't even know we had. So thanks again for everybody being on this call.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our session. We will be able to provide out a link of the recording, I hope, to everyone who registered. And check out Oregon RAIN for their website for more information about this event and other upcoming events that are going to be held as we continue to recover and reopen Oregon. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you in person sometime soon.